Welcome, welcome. You have found the Daily Dose of Lambdog, Lambdog's Sunday School Edition. And I just want to start out really quick with a prayer. May anything that I say that is untrue hit the ground and not make it to your ears. May it not even hear, only His truth coming from what I'm about to say. Amen. Um, I don't I don't want to mislead anyone, but what this subject is actually about is about being misled, and it's about heresy and a a huge stumbling block in the Old Testament of all places. And I'm talking about, as you may be able to see from the title, is Jonah and the whale. Kind of appropriate for Sunday school because it is a um, a main Sunday school type lesson. Hopefully nobody gets hung up. I'm going to do the New International Version, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully nobody gets hung up on that version, and hopefully what I say I'm able to talk about clearly, because it's something that deserves to be talked about clearly. Now, why is that? Well, I'll tell you. In the debate between atheists and theists, the number of days that Jonah is in the whale is always this huge point of contention. The idea being that nobody could possibly survive being in a fish. What would make a fish swallow a person and spit him out is interesting, because that's not what the book of Jonah is about at all. Where it opens the door for heresy, though, is if you say, well, because it seems unlikely, that couldn't possibly be literal. Well, as soon as you open the door for a non-literal translation of any sort of canonical text, you open the door for it being used for whatever. If all of a sudden the Bible or the Quran or any holy text is metaphorical, you might as well throw it out, because it no longer bears any meaning whatsoever. And many, many cults have been born of an extra metaphorical translation of certain old canonical texts. The book of Jonah is by far no exceptions. Now, in my education and what I was taught was the Bible is to be understood as being literal, except when it tells you that it is not being literal. Such as if a prophet has a dream, then it says that the prophet's having a dream. If the prophet's having a vision, it says when the prophet is having a vision. So there you have it. Are there some unlikely literal events? In our current modern understanding, yes. Is it really literal truth? Well, here's the thing. If I am telling you a story, whether it is a factual literation or not, it's not reoccurring when you and I are talking about it. But if you understand what I am saying in the literal sense, it carries with it a very different meaning than if you're trying to interpret my words in a metaphor. If you go too far in that direction, then you're going to be led astray. I'm not, my gifting is not as a teacher, again, but that's just how I was taught. So here we go. Jonah and the whale. Now, why do I bring it up? Because when I finally sat down and said, well, I'm going to go ahead and read the Bible, when I made it to the minor prophets and to Jonah, I was blown away with by this story. And it's going to, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's going to put an interesting spin on how I saw God, or my understanding of how God saw um, non-believers, or how God saw not necessarily heretics but atheists. So it's very interesting that everybody uses this book as this linchpin of disbelief when it is so great. But now that's part of the amazing thing about God and the Bible is that it will use something blatantly obvious as a stumbling block. Um, and the way that you approach a stumbling block is one of two ways. You can either trip and fall and give it up, or you can examine the stumbling block and figure out how to get over it. So here we go, moving right along. And I don't want to read too much of it because the NIV has a copyright on it, so you can only use a certain amount of it, I think. I don't know if that's still in hack or not. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for the port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, so that we will not perish." All right. Really quick, we've got God talking directly to Jonah. And first things first, and this is something that we deal with a lot in our modern times. Jonah as a prophet of God. Um, when a prophet of the Old Testament spoke for God, should the prophecy not come true, those people were killed. That's how it came down. They didn't get to just keep on making predictions. And by there being truth in their predictions, people knew that this person was what they had said had come from God. So, such it is with Jonah. I mean, God is talking to him. That's how during the Old Covenant people were talked to, was through these prophets. Um, then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord, because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. The interesting part, some may say, how come these sailors were so immediately superstitious? Why couldn't they just believe that the storm was something supernatural? Well, sailors are a superstitious lot as a whole, and sailors in the Bible are by no means an exception to this. And for that matter, sailors in the Bible may in fact be even more superstitious than otherwise. And obviously there was some truths in their beliefs, because they were able to, one, cast lots, as it says, to determine who was the cause of it. And then they actually did found out, so the lots that they cast, there was something specific about what they were doing that actually worked. Okay, little dark magic there, if you will. And why didn't they just think that the storm was a natural occurrence? Obviously it was so bad that they couldn't do anything but appeal to some greater power. And with that, I'm going to leave off, and we got a little section here, which now Jonah flees the Lord and Jonah's prayer. That's all added to these texts. It isn't really part of the original stuff, and we're going to leave it there for now. And anybody with any input, I'm all ears if you like, and we'll catch y'all later. And Thank you for taking today's Lambdog's Daily Dose.